What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here, and in this video, I wanted to showcase some exotic weapons that will be shining brightly next season in Season of the Wish. In the TWAB this week, and the weapon tuning preview last month, Bungie showcased a bunch of changes coming to the sandbox. They also showed us the seasonal artifact mods coming in Season of the Wish, so with all that info in mind, I wanted to point out some exotic weapons that will be feeling really good when the new season launches on Tuesday. So the artifact mods for next season have Anti-Barrier Sidearm, Unstoppable Hand Cannon and Bow, and Overload Pulse Rifle, Auto Rifle, and Rocket Launchers. Now, it's very weird that we have 3 Overload options and only 1 Anti-Barrier option. I wish Pulse Rifle would have been AB because sidearms as anti-barriers are not ideal. But speaking of anti-barrier sidearms, that brings us to the first exotic that you will want to have leveled up, and that is Forerunner. This is an exotic sidearm from the 30th Anniversary Edition and a shout out to Halo. It has super deep ammo reserves and deals great precision damage. It is also awesome at long range, so it's perfect for anti-barrier sidearm. We've had this once before, I believe it was in Season of the Haunted, and I messed around with it in the Proving Grounds GM and it performed quite well. Another great exotic sidearm is Final Warning. This is a strand sidearm that launched in Lightfall, and its exotic perk All at Once is great for deleting a champion's barrier shield. It also unravels enemies. Traveler's Chosen is nice for ability spam builds as it helps to get abilities back, something that will be slightly harder to do thanks to the incoming nerfs to mods and orb generation that are coming in Season of the Wish. And lastly, we have Cryosthesia 77k, which is a stasis sidearm. This thing can shoot a freezing blast, and freezing unstoppables will stun them when you shatter the freeze, so it will have dual functionality next season. And another sidearm that won't have dual functionality unless it is bugged is Devil's Ruin. The laser beam from the gun can stun unstops, so I am curious if the regular sidearm bullets will be able to pierce shields. Highly unlikely, but Le Monarch was able to stun overloads from the poison and also break shields with piercing bowstring until it was patched early in the season last year, so you never know. Malfeasance was also able to stun unstops and overloads for a brief time, so we'll see. And a couple strong stasis weapons that can stun unstoppables thanks to freeze and are just awesome weapons in general are Ager's Scepter and Conditional Finality. And Conditional has the added bonus of being able to also cause ignitions. Speaking of weapons that may have unintended dual functionality, we have Revision Zero. This weapon is getting yet another buff, this time dealing 100% more damage to champions. It was already buffed in the past, and it is an exotic primary, so it deals 40% extra damage to red bars. On top of all this, pulse rifles are getting a blanket 12.5% damage bonus to red and orange bars, so Revision Zero is eating good next season. And it may also get overload and anti-barrier, but like I said, that stuff usually gets patched early on. Regardless, this could be an awesome option next season, as again, we don't really have a good long-range option for anti-barrier. And that brings us to the long-standing king of anti-barrier, Wishender. I would be remiss not to mention this powerhouse. It can one-shot barrier shields in GM content, and can one-shot miners in GMs, and it gives us ridiculous amounts of super energy thanks to its triple penetrating arrow. And this is the last time I'll mention it, but it may double dip with Unstoppable Bow and Anti-Barrier, at least in the first week or two, unless Bungie has finally learnt its lesson. Arbalest is always a strong option for Anti-Barrier, and now I want to give a mention to the biggest sleeper on the list, Ariana's Vow. This thing has potential to be a powerhouse next season. Again, it is a decent long-range option for anti-barrier, but it is also solar, and the artifact has this neat little mod in the final column called Raise of Precision. While radiant, solar precision final blows cause combatants to ignite. Well, it is super easy to get radiant next season thanks to Ember of Torches or the artifact mod Flint Striker, where rapid solar weapon precision hits and rapid solar weapon final blows grant radiant. So you could plink a few crits with your Ariana's Vow on a champion, get radiant, and then simply kill a red bar with a precision shot and it will ignite. Ariana's has very good ammo economy, so it could be a monster with Raise of Precision. The craziest thing about this is it may even work when you are not on a solar subclass. You can get radiant from Flint Striker and cause an ignition from Raise of Precision, so definitely something to look out for. I just really wanted to highlight how strong this weapon could be next season. And for the final anti-barrier option, I might as well give a shout out to one of my favorite exotics, the Lament. It is simply too good not to mention, especially when we know we are getting Solar Surge for 1/3 of the season. So that's it for the anti-barrier options, now let's look at some unstoppables. I was really surprised we didn't get Unstoppable Glaive thanks to all the Glaive reworks that we just got. But speaking of glaives, the 3 class exotic glaives are all getting buffed next season, so you may want to mess around with those, especially in content that doesn't have champions. As for the unstoppables that we do have, let's start with the bows. Hierarchy of Needs and Tiku's Divination are a couple really strong options. Unfortunately, neither of them have Solar 3.0 synergy, which is bizarre to me that Tiku's doesn't apply Scorch. Here's hoping that they get some synergy for that in the future. Regardless, I used both of these bows this past season and they both feel really good. Another bow I had a lot of fun with is Verglas Curve. It is a bit annoying as you can't hipfire it at will, as you may waste your Hail Barrage, but aside from that annoying pain point, this thing has wonderful synergy with Stasis, and Stasis will be featured quite heavily in the artifact as well next season. Hail to Storm is an artifact perk that will allow Stasis Crystals to deal increased damage, so it could be awesome with this bow in particular. And you can pair it with Pillar of Ice to basically litter the battlefield with Stasis Crystals. Pair this with Whisper of Rending and Whisper of Fissures, and you'll be killing everything in sight. And speaking of Stasis exotic primaries, Wicked Implement is a scout rifle that has great synergy with Stasis and can deal with both overloads by applying slow from rapid precision hits, as well as unstoppable thanks to being able to freeze targets as well. So don't sleep on that weapon next season either. For the last bow I want to mention, Le Monarch is still a great option for overloads, especially because I am not sold on Overload Pulse Rifle. But that is about the only non-solar option that I'll be suggesting. And remember, slow is great for dealing with overloads, so you're probably better to just spec into a fun stasis build if the content has overloads, or run some weapons that have chill clip. For unstoppable hand cannons, Sunshot is already feeling really awesome, so definitely have that ready to rock next season. It's such a good gun, and it can spread Scorch. Malfeasance with Lucky Pants is another awesome unstoppable hand cannon option, and Thorn is getting a catalyst next season, so it could be fun to use as well. Onto Overload Auto Rifle, Necrochasm is a super fun gun to use and has great ad clear potential, but it is outshone by the best in slot Quicksilver Storm. But both are good kinetic overload auto rifles. Cerberus Plus 1 is a bit of a meme and not great in higher end content, and Sweet Business actually goes hard with Actium War Rig, as my buddy Ark pointed out in a solo GM on the Mars Battleground. So don't sleep on that combo for Overload Auto Rifle. And Monte Carlo has nice synergy with melee based builds, especially something like Peregrine Greaves, which is getting a buff next season. For energy options, you could try Tommy's Matchbook, but the self damage is not ideal in high end content, but it is solar, so it has good synergy with the artifact mods next season. For Overload Pulse Rifles, Outbreak Perfected is probably the only logical option, but I also have a soft spot for Bad Juju. Bad Juju has better ad clear capability, but Outbreak would be far better for sustained fire on a champion, especially in a fire team. And lastly, that brings us to Overload Rocket Launcher. I'm not convinced how good this will be to stun champions, especially considering Overload Minotaur's blink and Captain's teleport around, so it could be very hard to get an initial stun. But the usual suspects will still be good here. Gallahorn can hold 2 in the mag, so it is good to run, especially in a fire team. But it doesn't have the greatest ammo economy, and we don't have any artifact perks like Lucent Finisher to create heavy. Dragon's Breath is also coming next season, so maybe that can be a play. Anyways, that is it for the anti-champion mods. I just want to give a few shoutouts to some exotics that are getting buffed. Vex Mythoclast is getting a whopping 200% damage increase to champions in the linear fusion mode, as well as 10% more damage to red bars and 25% to bosses. So it is primed to shred next season, as it already got a buff this season. But next season, it won't be getting any anti-champion mods. But it being solar means it will really shine next season thanks to the artifact mods. Sleeper Simulant is always a favorite of mine and will synergize nicely with Flint Striker and Kindling Trigger, as will the newly buffed Whisper of the Worm. Sniper rifles are getting a 15% damage buff, so they could feel quite nice next season. Izanagi's Burden could go quite hard as well. And I didn't mention it when I talked about glaives because I was more focused on the class specific ones, but the exotic heavy glaive Winterbite could be a menace next season thanks to its synergy with Stasis. And that pretty much covers every exotic weapon that will have anti-champion capability or that is receiving a buff in some way next season. In my opinion, the seasonal artifact for next season is looking really fun. Arc and Void will pretty much be off the table, hence why I didn't really mention any weapons with those affinities, but you can run what you like. But me personally, I'm excited to go ham with Stasis and Solar builds. I have a ton of ideas in the work and will be testing stuff and working my butt off to bring you the strongest builds possible. So if you want to see those, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any future uploads. And if you found this video helpful or informative, then I would really appreciate it if you hit like. Lastly, if you are still watching, then I thank you so much for watching to the end. Happy build crafting and take care.